I had lost jobs before, but this time was very different. I was going through a marriage ending. So at the time I lost the job, I felt like it was my last sense of identity. And when I lost it, I honestly didn't know who I was. I felt like a failure in multiple parts of my life and didn't know how to go on from there. Even though I was no longer a husband, I felt like I had really mishandled my finances and then lost the job. I was wrong that that was my last sense of identity because I was still a father. And that period really framed what fatherhood was to me because, like a lot of things, fatherhood is not what you are when times are good, when things are easy. What I discovered is fatherhood is showing up when it feels like the hardest thing. What I can see clearly now, but at the time, mo- honestly, most of it is a blur. I remember the broad strokes. I remember the terror and pain of not knowing what I was going to do. And as the months went by, I began to think, wow, this is really bad. I had to think about how was I going to pay my bills? How was I going to have an income? I tried to get odd jobs within my industry here and there, but they just were not enough. It was like one day of work here and then never heard back, or um, a small project here and then that ended. I was trying to nurture those relationships with those small projects, but they kind of didn't go anywhere, and then it just became radio silence. I started doing food delivery, Uber Eats, DoorDash. I signed up, and it took like 5 minutes to sign up, and I turned on the app, and I was off. I was so pleasantly surprised. I felt like it was a real lifeline. And that first night, I made $100. I just drove all night. I had a dose of hope. This was a really scary time, and I still had bills to pay. And I still remember I got a couple of really big bills in the mail, and I was not sure how I was going to pay them. I also had debts that I was carrying, which I just didn't have the income to pay them. And I had to decide not whether I was going to pay them, but which ones I was going to pay. Because I couldn't pay them all, so I had to figure out what what was the most urgent, what was going to create the biggest problem if I didn't pay it, and just extend the runway. So I was doing food delivery. Um, all the other projects had kind of dried up within like what my occupation was. I have 50-50 custody, so I had my daughter half the time, and the other half the time she was with her mother. When I didn't have her, I was doing food delivery the entire time. I was I would do food delivery up until the minute I would get her back. And I wanted to share one thing that specifically stood out. I was doing Uber Eats really, really late, like at 4 in the morning. And I remember I got this order. It was kids cereal and milk, and it was just a really, really humbling experience. I was doing whatever it took to get by. Obviously, I was trying to manage like finding a new job, finding new projects, to get back on track with jobs within my industry. And what was really scary in this time, because I felt like I was just spinning out of control, just trying to be able to make something, stop the bleeding, make some kind of income, because I was way behind. I was way, what was coming in was not enough. It just wasn't enough. So it was just a matter of like slowing the bleeding, whatever I had saved before I lost my job, just slowing the rate that I was burning through that. And as scary as all this was, the scarier thought was my daughter now had a dad who was just a complete mess. The first 2 months I was hopeful. I thought things were going to I thought it was going to be a short unemployment. And then by month 3 and 4 I started to get really scared. I started to have a lot of doubt in whether how bad this was really going to be. But the scarier thought was my daughter was 4 at the time, so really young, really, really formative years, really important years. And she's like an amazing kid. And I saw myself at risk of being checked out during this time because I was freaked out about money. I was freaked out about life. I was freaked out about how I was going to pay the mortgage, how I was going to what I'm buying for food, other expenses, utilities, all that, insurances for various things, gas. And it really scared me that I could lose that time because I was so distracted by my situation, by my job situation. And so this is one of those things that's really easy to say it now, looking back. Like, of course, it's so simple. Like, I focused on fatherhood and everything else didn't matter. I started to realize I had to make a really concerted effort at being present with my daughter, just taking in every bit of um, her growing up. Like, she's not going to stop growing up just because I don't have a job, just because we have less money. It's not like she can say, okay, I'll stop growing until you get stable again and then we'll continue. That fear of missing out on those years really, really struck me. And so what I started to see was I could separate the two things. I could separate the time I was earning money, but the times that I had her, when I had her, obviously I couldn't. Those weren't times I could work anyway, right? So I said to myself, I can't do anything about. I can't work anyway. So what I can do is I can focus completely on being a dad. I gave myself license to enjoy those moments without allowing myself to really think about the chaos that was coming down on me. Not in the beginning. In the beginning, I was I was putting on a brave face, putting on a smile, as on where on the inside I was falling apart. I would take her, get her ready in the morning, take her to school, get her to school, hug her, smile, and say goodbye. And then as soon as I got back into my car, I was just falling apart. I didn't hear about back about this possible job, or this one is a no. I just got a response that it's a no, and then just going, saying, well, it's time to turn on the app and do some deliveries. I realized through this whole thing that my other identities as a husband, as an employee, I could not control. I did not have control over that identity to a certain degree. I could control. I couldn't control losing my job. I could not control losing my marriage. Obviously, I could affect things, but ultimately, those were dependent on other people making decisions that affected my life. And when those fell away, I thought I was really lost. I didn't know who I was, but then I realized I was still a father. I would always be a father to my daughter, and I actually had full control over the dad I chose to show up as, no matter how bad things got, because I realized she didn't care about money. She didn't care about um, job titles. She just wanted a loving father, a present and loving father. And what I realized was that all those other identities could go away. And it became really apparent that if I prioritized those other identities over her, that's something that's something she would care about. That's something that would affect her, especially when she gets older, to feel like I had prioritized those other things over her. So really losing my job really helped me set my priorities. Being a father was the one thing I could not lose. Everything else could fall away, but being a father, that identity was the one that was non-negotiable. During this unemployment, we were going through different holidays like Easter and Christmas. And I remember having to go to the dollar store to buy my items. I couldn't afford big fancy presents. And what struck me was that it made no difference to her. I thought that money and career defined me, but what I found out is that it's nice, it's not what really mattered. I realized during that time what I could lose and what I could not lose. Really enjoy you being here. Thanks so much. See you next time.